The golden glow of the spotlight has always been a beautiful illusion. Long before the era of instant streaming and digital playlists, there was a time when the world was ruled by the sheer, unadulterated presence of genuine musical gods. They did not just perform, they commanded. A single guitar riff had the power to reshape an entire generation. A solitary chorus could lift a packed stadium into a state of spiritual ecstasy, and one transcendent voice could transform the most agonizing heartbreak into a universal battle cry. Tonight we are turning back the clock to revisit the ultimate icons who defined their respective eras, the legendary figures whose very names evoke images of pure glamour, untamed energy, and the sweet ache of nostalgia. These were the metal gods, the grunge poets, the MTV titans, and the arena legends who turned the music industry into a high-stakes theater of dreams. Each possessed a signature sound that could be recognized in a matter of seconds, an auditory fingerprint that left an indelible mark on the cultural landscape. For decades, their lives seemed like the ultimate fantasy, lived under a cascade of flashbulbs and adulation, wrapped in leather, velvet, and gold. But beneath the dazzling veneer of stadium royalty and the intoxicating roar of the crowd, a different story was always unfolding. The stage can be a sanctuary, but it can also be a beautifully constructed cage. Behind the perfect smiles, the daredevil charisma, and the multi-platinum triumphs, these idols carried burdens that the public was never meant to see. For some, the relentless pressure of maintaining a larger-than-life persona began to fracture the soul. For others, the very applause they craved became a deafening noise that drowned out their quietest cries for help. We see them now, some still bravely chasing the neon lights on the road, while others have retreated into the shadows of a quiet, reflective retirement, and a few have tragically left the stage forever, leaving behind echoes that refuse to die. As we step into this world of faded glamour and enduring brilliance, we begin to realize that the brightest flames often cast the darkest shadows. The path to immortality is never smooth, and the cost of becoming a legend is often higher than anyone dares to admit. Let the house lights fade, let the music swell, and allow yourself to be pulled back into the intoxicating, dangerous, and utterly captivating world of rock royalty, where every triumph was legendary and every secret was fiercely guarded. To understand the true weight of the crown these idols wore, one must journey back to the genesis of their ascent, to those intoxicating golden years when the spotlight first embraced them. The rise to the pinnacle of the music industry was a dizzying, cinematic whirlwind where raw talent collided with an era of unprecedented excess. In the shimmering landscape of the late 20th century, the world was hungry for larger-than-life heroes, and Hollywood became the epicenter of a new kind of musical mythology. For young men armed with nothing but a guitar, a soaring vocal range, and an insatiable desire to be seen, the transition from smoky, anonymous clubs to the blinding glare of stadium spotlights happened almost overnight. It was a time of pure, unadulterated magic, where a single appearance on a burgeoning television network like MTV could transform a musician into a household name and a global sex symbol. The rewards were immense, painted in the vibrant colors of multi-platinum records, sold-out arena tours, and an adoring public that hung on their every word. They walked through life like emperors of a sonic empire, draped in the finest fabrics, surrounded by an entourage of handlers, and insulated by the wealth that their creative genius generated. The industry created a perfect, flawless facade around them, a carefully curated illusion of perpetual youth, effortless cool, and unbreakable strength. To the outside world, they were invulnerable beings who lived a life of constant celebration, moving effortlessly from one high-profile triumph to the next. Yet, behind this breathtaking spectacle of brilliance and grandeur, the first cracks in the golden armor were already beginning to form, hidden from view by the very managers and record executives who profited from their brilliance. The reality of life behind the scenes was far removed from the pristine imagery broadcast into millions of living rooms. The golden years were, in truth, an exhausting crucible of non-stop demands, grueling travel schedules, and intense, unyielding scrutiny. The pressure to replicate past successes created an atmosphere of constant anxiety, where an artist was only as good as their latest chart position. Behind the closed doors of luxurious dressing rooms and five-star hotel suites, a subtle but dangerous shift was occurring. The camaraderie that had fueled their early garage days began to erode under the weight of financial disputes, creative differences, and the toxic whispers of behind-the-scenes intrigues. Internal rivalries grew more bitter as individual egos clashing for dominance, and the initial joy of making music was slowly replaced by the clinical mechanics of a corporate machine. Moreover, the industry demanded that these stars remain frozen in time, perpetually embodying the wild, rebellious spirits that had made them famous, even as the toll of years and exhaustion began to mount. To maintain this impossible standard, many turned to dangerous coping mechanisms, seeking solace in substances that promised to numb the pain or provide the artificial energy required to face yet another stadium of screaming fans. The very system that elevated them to the status of deities also isolated them from reality, creating a profound sense of loneliness that no amount of public adulation could ever truly cure. They were surrounded by thousands of people every single night, yet they were profoundly alone, trapped inside a prison of their own making. The public saw only the triumphant poses, the synchronized light shows, and the iconic album covers, completely unaware of the physical exhaustion, the strained vocal cords, and the emotional fractures that were quietly deepening. It was a perilous tightrope walk over an abyss of self-destruction, masked by the intoxicating roar of the crowd and the steady hum of the hit-making machinery. As the decade progressed, the tension between the public myth and the private reality grew increasingly unsustainable, setting the stage for a dramatic reckoning that would forever alter the landscape of rock history. The inevitable crash came when the weight of the perfect illusion could no longer be sustained by human shoulders, forcing the hidden drama out of the shadows and directly into the unforgiving light of public reality. Behind the heavy soundproof doors of standard hotel suites and secluded estates, the turning points of these legendary lives unfolded in ways that the glossy music magazines of the era refused to print. The music industry had a vested financial interest in maintaining the pristine, untouchable image of its deities, meaning that when the cracks finally split wide open, the ensuing scandals and tragedies were met with a wall of institutional silence and desperate damage control. For some of these idols, the breaking point arrived in the form of a sudden, catastrophic physical betrayal, where the very instrument that gave them their power, their voice or their body, began to fail under the relentless strain of decades on the road. The public would be told of a sudden tour postponement due to exhaustion or scheduling conflicts, while behind the scenes, frantic meetings were held between doctors, lawyers, and managers trying to salvage multi-million-dollar contracts while the artist sat in silence, facing the terrifying prospect of an empty stage. For others, the drama was deeply spiritual and emotional, a sudden realization that the roar of 70,000 people could no longer fill the hollow space inside their chest. The toxic behind-the-scenes intrigues that had brewed during the golden years boiled over into public legal warfare, shattering long-standing brotherhoods and leaving once inseparable creative partners communicating solely through high-priced attorneys. The ultimate tragedy, however, was reserved for those who could not find a way out of the labyrinth of fame, whose private battles with dependency and isolated depression finally culminated in a silent, heartbreaking exit from the world. When the news finally broke that a voice which had defined a generation had been permanently silenced, the shockwaves tore through the cultural landscape like a physical blow. Suddenly, the public was forced to look past the leather jackets, the flashing lights, and the swaggering stadium poses to see the fragile, deeply wounded human being who had been hidden in plain sight all along. In the aftermath of these turning points, the silence from the major studios and the media was deafening. Society had demanded that these artists remain frozen as immortal symbols of rebellion and youth. And when they proved to be tragically mortal, the industry quickly scrambled to commodify their grief, repackaging their pain into retrospective box sets and emotionally manipulative tributes. The survivors of this brutal crucible were forced to reinvent themselves entirely, learning how to walk through a world that no longer looked at them with the same feverish intensity. They had to shed the skin of the stadium gods they once were and find a way to live with the ghosts of their past, understanding that the very spotlight that had warmed them for so long had also burned away the normal lives they could never get back. This was the dark price of the rock and roll dream, a stark reminder that behind every timeless anthem that still plays on the radio, there was a real human toll paid in full by the forgotten idols who gave everything to the music. As the dust settles on the turbulent decades of stadium triumphs and backstage heartbreaks, we are left to contemplate the enduring blueprint these masters of melody left behind. The journey of these icons did not end when the charts moved on or when the 90s alternative revolution rewrote the rules of mainstream cool. Instead, their lives transitioned into a fascinating, deeply moving final act where the survivors of rock's most volatile eras became the keepers of a sacred flame. Today, looking back from our modern vantage point, their legacies stand as monumentally secure, serving as a reminder of an era of pure, unmanufactured showmanship that will likely never be replicated in our hyper-digital world. Some of these legends have transformed into venerable road warriors, crisscrossing the globe on massive nostalgia circuits and proving that true vocal grit and instrumental mastery have no expiration date. They take the stage with a sense of hard-won wisdom, the wild arrogance of youth, replaced by a profound mutual gratitude between the artist and the audience. Others have chosen the dignity of a quiet, reflective sanctuary, choosing to archive their past and focus on the quiet joys of a life lived out of the glare of the flashbulbs. Entirely at peace with the knowledge that their timeless records continue to play in bedrooms, bars, and cars around the world. The biographies of these individuals are rich with little-known details that paint a picture far more complex than their stage personas ever allowed. We see the quiet generosity of those who funded charities entirely in secret, the intense intellectual curiosity of frontmen who became visual artists or authors, and the sheer, stubborn resilience of musicians who continued to play through debilitating physical illnesses and the cruel onset of advanced age. Even those who left the stage prematurely, whose voices were silenced by tragedy, remain vividly alive in the cultural consciousness. Their influence woven tightly into the fabric of every modern song that dares to reach for emotional honesty and sonic grandeur. This is the true, unfiltered beauty of the golden age of rock. Time will inevitably pass, faces will wrinkle, and the physical stadiums where these spectacles unfolded may be demolished, but the sound itself remains entirely electric, forever pristine, and completely immune to the decay of years. These iconic legends gave us heavy riffs to live by, unforgettable choruses to scream loudly into the midnight air, and beautiful, heartbreaking anthems that still hit with the raw emotional power of a first love or a first rebellion. They taught us that while the spotlight is a beautiful, fleeting illusion, the music created beneath it is completely